Before we begin the stories, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a nice comment, just like you. Have you ever been so far from civilization that even the silence feels alive? I'm not the kind of person who usually shares personal stories online, especially ones like this, but what happened to me 3 years ago is something I just can't forget. Maybe if I tell this story, I'll finally be able to sleep peacefully again. It happened in the deserts of Arizona, a dry, completely empty place where all you can see is red sand, heat waves, and haunting silence. I was on a solo road trip I'd planned for years. The idea was simple: drive from Texas to California through the vast wilderness, camp out there, live simply, and feel free. But that freedom didn't last long. I was deep in the desert, miles away from the highway, following unmarked trails I found on a travel forum. Someone had written that the area was remote, but beautiful. You'd see parts of the desert no tourist ever would. It sounded perfect. I packed my gear, filled up the gas tank, and set off with excitement. The first 2 days were calm. Just me, my old car, some canned food, and the kind of silence you never find in cities. I camped under the stars, took photos, and recorded voice notes. It felt like therapy. Until the third night. That's when things started to change. I had driven farther than I planned. No cell signal. My GPS had stopped working hours ago. I hadn't seen a single person or car since sunrise. Still, I found a good spot to stop, a flat patch near some rock formations. I set up my tent and cooked a simple dinner. As the sun went down, the temperature dropped fast. Deserts get freezing cold at night. I zipped up my jacket and listened to the wind. Then I heard something strange. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was breathing. Slow, heavy, human. I jumped up, heart pounding, grabbing my flashlight. I pointed it toward the rocks. Nothing. I convinced myself it was just the wind passing through the stones. I was alone, tired, and my mind was playing tricks, right? I went back into my tent, zipped it up, and lay down with the flashlight in my hand. I don't know how long I slept, maybe 2 hours, before I woke up to the sound of crunching footsteps on dry sand, circling the tent. Then came a slow, long scratch along the side of the tent. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then the voice came, soft, like a whisper right in my ear through the thin fabric of the tent. It said just one clear, cold word. Not angry, but firm. I jumped out of the tent, waving my flashlight wildly. Nothing. No one. The desert was silent again. Too silent. In 10 minutes, I had packed my things with trembling hands. I didn't even fold the tent, just threw it into the car. I started the engine and sped off, bumping over rocks and sand, trying to find the way I had come. Then, for just a second, my headlights caught something. A human shape, standing still. Arms unnaturally long, skin pale like dry bones, and black eyes. It vanished the moment I blinked. I drove for hours, without direction, without a path, not knowing if I was even going the right way. Just before dawn, I found an abandoned gas station, not on any map. It looked deserted for decades. I was too exhausted to care. I parked behind it, locked the doors, and tried to rest. I woke up to knocking on the window. Not normal knocking, tapping, like fingernails. The desert around me was empty. I saw no one. But the tapping didn't stop. When I finally looked in the side mirror, my stomach turned to ice. There were handprints all over the rear window. Dozens of them. Small ones. Child-sized. But I saw no children,
None. I started the engine and drove, didn't stop, didn't eat. I drove until I finally reached a main road. When I arrived at a small, dusty town, I went into a quiet diner. An old man behind the counter looked at me, saw my state, and said, without asking, "You went off the path, didn't you?" I nodded slowly. He sighed. "They don't like that," he said. "You're lucky they let you leave." I asked him what he meant. He said, "Some places aren't meant for people. Remember that." That sentence still haunts me. I never go on solo trips anymore. I stay on marked roads. I never ignore a phone signal warning. I never go deep into the desert, because something out there watches and waits. If you ever find yourself in the middle of nowhere and the air feels too still, if you hear breathing that isn't yours, or a whisper from the dark, don't answer. Don't look. Just run. This wasn't a dream. It wasn't a hallucination. It happened to me, and it still follows me in my nightmares.
I want to tell you a story that still makes my hand shake every time I remember it. This happened 3 years ago, in the summer of 2022, in the Nevada desert. I wasn't looking for thrills or chasing ghosts. I was just a man trying to escape the noise of life. Things were heavy. Work pressure, a relationship falling apart. I wanted a quiet place where I could finally breathe. So I booked a small cabin on Airbnb in the middle of nowhere, about 45 minutes from the nearest gas station. The description said it was off the road, but had solar power and running water. Nothing fancy, just a wooden cabin surrounded by sand, dry shrubs, and silence. I arrived late in the afternoon. The heat was intense, but the scenery was breathtaking. An endless sky, an endless land. It felt like another planet. But from the moment I stepped out of the car, I felt something. Have you ever felt the air around you grow so still that the silence itself feels like it's watching you? That's how it was. I ignored it. Told myself I just wasn't used to the quiet. I settled in, made some coffee, and sat on the porch watching the sunset. It was beautiful until the sun disappeared. Then the stillness became worse. Even the desert animals seemed gone. No wind, no insects, just a heavy silence pressing on my chest. That night I couldn't sleep. The bed was fine, the cabin cool thanks to the fan, but my mind wouldn't rest. Every creak in the woods sounded too loud. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps outside. Slow crunching like someone walking on gravel. I froze. There were no neighbors. My car was the only one for miles. I turned off the fan and listened. The footsteps stopped. I waited, barely breathing. Then, 3 slow knocks on the front door. Not loud, but deliberate. I didn't move. Didn't answer. I just sat there in bed, my heart pounding. No words, no threats, just silence. Then, again, 3 slow knocks, same rhythm. I waited an hour before daring to peek through the window. No one. In the morning, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the wood shifting or an animal brushing against the door. I was tired, anxious, sleep-deprived, but a part of me knew it was more than that. I should have left, but I stayed. The second day was calm. I wandered into the desert, took
took some photos, tried to relax. The sun was brutal, but the landscape had a strange beauty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That night, I locked every door, pulled the curtains tight, and left all the lights on. Around 3 a.m., I woke up again. Not because of a sound, but a feeling. Have you ever suddenly felt someone in the room with you? I sat up, my heart racing. The lights were still on. The room was empty. But the porch door was wide open. I knew I had locked it. I had checked 3 times before bed. Shaking, I walked to the door. Nothing outside. Just the dark desert. I closed it again, locked it tight. Then I saw them. In the sand just beyond the porch. Footprints. Bare human footprints. Dozens of them. Coming from the darkness, circling the cabin, then vanishing into the desert. I stared for a long time. The sand was untouched, except for those prints. No animal tracks, no tire marks, just bare feet. I didn't sleep at all that night. When the sun rose, I packed my things, threw everything into the car, ready to leave. But the battery was dead. It wasn't old, and I hadn't left the lights on. It made no sense. No cell signal either. For the first time in my life, I felt true panic. I sat in the car until the heat became unbearable, then went back inside the cabin to wait for the temperature to drop. That afternoon, I heard a sound I will never forget. The crying of a child out in the desert. It started faint, then grew louder, closer, but it didn't sound real. It was distorted, like a recording, glitchy, wrong, like someone playing it on an old tape recorder. I didn't move, didn't look outside. I sat on the floor, heart hammering. The crying circled the cabin slowly, then stopped. Silence. Then, whispering, right outside the wall, so low I couldn't make out words, but it wasn't one voice. It was many, like a group murmuring just beyond the wooden wall. I covered my ears. I prayed. I just wanted it to end. Finally, with sunrise, it stopped. I tried the car again. It started perfectly, as if nothing had happened. I didn't wait. I didn't collect the rest of my stuff. I just drove, fast, straight, not stopping for anything. When I finally reached a gas station with people, phone signal, noise, I could finally breathe. I never went back to that cabin. I never contacted the owner. I didn't even leave a review. But I did some research later. Turns out that area has a dark history. Old native burial grounds, disappearances, even rumors of military experiments. People talk about shapeshifters, shadow men, things that mimic voices that aren't theirs. I don't know what I heard or what I saw, but I know one thing. The desert doesn't want us there. There's something ancient out there, watching, waiting. So if you ever find yourself in the middle of nowhere and you hear it call to you, if you hear knocking, don't answer. Don't look. Just run.
I never imagined that a simple road trip would turn into the worst night of my life. But here I am, still shaking, still unsure of what I saw, or what followed me out of that desert.
It all started last summer. I was driving from Arizona to California, a long, empty road. The sun was high in the sky, and there was nothing around me for miles. I've always loved driving alone. Windows down, music loud, the open road ahead. Just me and my thoughts. But that day, the silence began to feel strangely heavy. Around 3 in the afternoon, my GPS suddenly stopped working. No signal. I told myself, it's fine, it'll come back soon. But after 15 minutes of complete silence and no direction, I realized I'd made a mistake. The road I was on was no longer paved. It had turned into cracked, dry dirt, stretching endlessly ahead. I thought maybe it was just a shortcut, but the farther I went, the stronger the feeling of isolation grew. No signal, no people, just sand, and a deep, uneasy feeling in my chest that something wasn't right. I stopped the car to check the map. That's when I noticed something strange. There were no tire tracks behind me. I had been driving on dirt for at least 20 minutes, but there wasn't a single mark in the sand. I thought maybe the wind had covered them, but there was no wind. Still, I tried to stay calm. I turned the car around and started driving back. But the road I came from had disappeared. Literally gone. It was now just flat desert, stretching endlessly in every direction. I got out of the car and walked a little, thinking maybe I just couldn't see clearly. Then I heard footsteps, clear as daylight behind me. I turned around quickly. Nothing. The desert was silent. Too silent. No birds, no wind, no sound at all except for my pounding heartbeat. I rushed back to the car, locked the doors, and tried to start the engine, but it was dead. The engine didn't even make a sound, as if the car were completely empty. Then I saw someone, far away, standing completely still, watching me. At first, I thought maybe he was a ranger or another traveler. I got out and shouted, "Hey, I'm lost! Can you help me?" But he didn't move. He just stood there. I looked away for a second to grab my phone, and when I looked back, he was gone. But now, someone else was closer. Not in front of me, but behind me. I turned slowly and saw him. Not a man. Something like a man. Tall, his skin stretched tightly over his bones. His eyes completely black. He smiled at me, but it wasn't a human smile. It was far too wide, too wrong. I couldn't move. My legs froze. Every part of my body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. Then he whispered something. I couldn't understand the words, but I heard them inside my head, not in my ears. Not in my ears, but inside my head. You don't belong here. Then everything went dark. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground. The sun had set, and the desert was freezing cold. I checked my watch. It was 4:10 a.m. I had been unconscious for nearly 12 hours. My car was gone. Not broken down. Gone. No tracks, no marks, as if it had been lifted right off the earth. I started walking. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there. Every shadow seemed to be watching me. Every whisper of wind sounded like it was calling my name. Then I saw it, a faint light, flickering like a small fire. I ran toward it, my heart pounding, thinking I might finally find help. But what I found instead is something I'll never forget. A circle of people, dressed in old dusty clothes that looked like they were from the 19th century. They stood silently around a fire, not speaking, just swaying slowly. Their faces were pale as bone, and their eyes completely black. I didn't make a sound, but one by one, they turned to look at me. No blinking, no expression. Then one of them pointed behind me. I turned, and there he was, the same tall man, skin stretched tight, that same impossible smile. He didn't speak this time. He just stared. Then slowly he raised his hand and pointed down. I looked. There was a grave, and carved into the stone was my name. I ran. I don't remember for how long or how far, just that I ran until my legs gave out. When I opened my eyes again, it was morning. I was lying beside the highway. My car was parked a few meters away, the keys still inside, my phone working again. It was as if nothing had happened, but when I checked the time, something was wrong. My phone said it was the next day, but my watch was frozen at 4:24 a.m., and it has never worked since. I tried to convince myself I had hallucinated. Maybe it was heat stroke, exhaustion, something logical. But a few days later, I found something in the trunk of my car, something I had never put there. A piece of old dusty fabric, just like the clothes those people wore in the circle. And inside it, a human tooth, still red with blood. I had it examined. No one could explain it. No DNA match. No record. Nothing. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear the whisper, "You don't belong here." If you're still listening, you survived. But some don't.